Brief. The first time I was ice climbing in Alberta, Canada in March of 1980, and I made a mistake and we got trapped on the mountain and I froze to death. Hypothermia got me with frostbite. And the second time my family has a congenital heart thing, and it was my turn in my mid 1950s. I had a massive 100% blockage in my widowmaker and died on the way to the catheterization lab, which is many miles from my house. And the first time I died, I ended up in this. Uh, I went through many different levels and stages of my near-death experience. The first time it was intense, it was long, it was detailed, but I ended in this state of union where I was nearly fully made of light, and one more photon felt like I would be reabsorbed into the great darkness of infinity. And it was expansive. It was beauty and joy and hope, love, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, all these things that are so much greater than our capacity, but they were all one. Love and beauty, one thing, joy and knowledge, one thing. And then I chose to come back. I had a family issue and I was allowed to come back. And so I came back, and I came back an entirely different person. I came back with the promise that I could return to where I was from. And I came back an entirely different person. My point of view, like all near-death experiencers and uh, all mystical experiencers, people who have had these radical experiences that are similar to NDE, Kundalini awakenings can be in that category. Came back a different person, shattered. My sense of my identity was gone, dissolved. I still had all of the memories of this body in the lifetime I had lived, but my attachment to them was uh, so shifted that I had this continual experience unto this day of being above myself, seeing through myself into this world, and that I am this celluloid, thin gossamer, and but through like everything else in the world, but everything has this uh, phenomenal depth of light pouring from it. And I knew that I was entirely different than I was before, and it was a long time integrating. And to one last, and then I'll be quiet. It's the second time I died. I didn't go nearly as far. I stayed close to my body. We had a family incident going on that it would be better if I stayed than if I left. And so I turned around and came back inside. We stayed inside the ambulance, although I couldn't see it and I was in a different dimension. I was I'll give you a little background. I was in the ambulance on the way to the catheterization lab, well outside my golden hour. So you get 1 hour before your heart starts to have damage. And I was way outside of that by the time I died. And I was not on morphine, even though it felt like I had an elephant on my chest or a rhinoceros standing on one foot. And I couldn't take painkillers like morphine. Opiates make me sick. So I was meditating. I had long practiced pain management meditation as part of my practice, and I was utilizing it to its fullest extent. And but I could still hear the paramedic. I heard a radio in and saying, "We're losing him." And I opened my eyes, and the pain came immediately back. And so I went back inside. I went back inside myself. I was outside of myself, and my human form was like a cave. And I couldn't see my human form. I could just see the interior. And I was kind of at the bottom end of the tunnel. But the tunnel was, everything was dark. But I could see that the inside of myself receded to a short distance. And I was outside, and toward me came this angelic being, which is an energy consciousness, indescribable in human words, of light. And it was speaking to me in the plural, come to us. We've been waiting for you. It's your time. And this time I didn't resist. This time I was like super excited because I didn't know that this was the day I was going to go home. As I was dying, I was, uh, I was the cheeriest one in the whole ER, with my wife there and my son there, and I was, I was in a lot of pain, and I was trying to be cool about it, but I didn't know that that day I was going to go home. I'd been waiting for it for 20 years. So this angelic being comes to me, and it's speaking in this plural, and I start to go, and then I think, wait a minute, family issue. Turn around, go back inside myself, inside this cave, see my daughter and my son and my granddaughter, and that they weren't ready, especially my granddaughter. There was a domestic violence thing that we had rescued her from with the brand new baby, and that I felt that I was needed. And I saw in my first near-death experience, I had the same thing happen in my second one. I saw my granddaughter's life with me and without me. They were like parallel tracks. And that happened to me when I was dead the first time. I saw my mom and my dad parallel tracks with me and without me. And in both cases, the suffering without me was much greater. Not to say there was no suffering with me, because I'm sometimes insufferable, but as anybody is. But I saw that my presence made a difference in their lives in a way that they would never know, because they would never know the alternative. And so I chose to come back. And this time I went back outside my body the second time, and the angelic being, the consciousness had receded some distance and then came back toward me. And I told it, I didn't really ask permission. I said, basically, if it's all the same with you, I'm sticking around till the end of my life, till the body wears out. And I just went back inside. And every near-death experience, the receiver is shattered to some extent. Their psyche, their emotional understanding, who they are, their identity becomes fragmented, and then one has to go through a process of integration. I changed. I felt like my physical experience of my body in the world was as if I was a little tiny being inside my brain, like running the show with computers, and I was distinctly separate from myself. I became depersonalized. I became derealized and de something or other. I can't think of the word. I became I lost my identity. My relationship to the world was so radically different that I became instantaneously non-attached, even though I was in the physical form, which means that my body's attached. But my psychology was lost. I was depressed. I was alone. I was outside myself, and I could see light inside of every single thing that I looked at, especially people. And it wasn't just like I could see it with my eyes. I could see it with my whole body. I could hear it with my ears. I'd taste it with my tongue. Eating was this bizarre experience where I had to consume calories to run this machine, because when I was dead, there was none of that. And so, and locomotion, moving, I still to this day, I have this weird thing that happens. Some days I'm like, oh my God, I have to move through time and space. What is, ah, give me my true self. A thought is a movement. Um, so there was all of that. And then there was the truth of this being inside of me, speaking to me constantly like a roaring Niagara Falls, overwhelming my psyche, calling me to itself without language. This extraordinary music roar, uh, name calling, calling me, so that it was always, it's kind of like tinnitus. Tinnitus never goes away. And there was this huge tinnitus inside of me that was always speaking to me. And I had to figure out what it wanted of me and why I came back for its purpose, not my own. And so there was this sort of parallel tracking. My purpose, my family, and this larger purpose, the divine that sent me, that allowed me to come back with its purpose of its own. And I had to determine how to live with that. Well, I was alone. This was 1980, and there were Raymond Moody's book titling near death experience as near death experience had come out, but I had no idea. I was fortunate to have had some training in centering prayer meditation from a Trappist monastery near where I went to Catholic high school. And that Trappist monastery was strongly influenced by Jack Kornfield, with Theravada Buddhism, and so they did this mashup, and they ended up with this practice of a single word, single-minded breath meditation, very pranayama. And so I began that practice in high school, it's what really saved me initially. So almost immediately after this, I was in college, and this was spring break. I left on a 3-month theater tour all around the United States. And so I was in this theater troupe, a traveling theater troupe, and I separated myself from everybody, this 15-passenger van, and I sat in the back of the pickup truck towing the trailer by myself for almost probably of the 24,000 miles we did, I probably did 23,500 in the back of the pickup truck alone. And I meditated most of the time, and I contemplated. And so as I began to refine myself, I found almost immediately that the only space for me to feel balanced in the world was inside this tinnitus that was speaking to me. And so as I sat and practiced listening, and there's no language with this thing, I found a rudimentary place of peace. Then I went back to my university. I was on exchange for the year. I went back to my university where and I was a mime in this theater. So I was a mime in this American Sign Language theater. I went back to my university to continue my studies, and I studied mime as well. And my mime teacher was from the Marcel Marceau School of Mime and taught uh, yoga. And he was a working in Tai Chi also. And so he had a knowledge of what Chi was. And he showed us the class, and I was the only one who was an adept at it because of my NDE, how to find my prana, how to find my Chi, my life force energy doing yoga. And I adopted that into my practice, yoga practice with Chi, with prana movement. And I stumbled into the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, and I read them and absorbed them inside myself. And I practiced Kriya Yoga for these 40 years in combination with the central idea of centering prayer as non-attachment to self, and that the one thing that stands between me and the divine, the beloved, is me. And so as I practice stepping aside from myself, I found that it helped heal me, helped integrate me. Because as I tried to dive into the world to like, I don't want to be this thing. I was depressed. I was angry. Okay. I spent a lot of time mad that I was allowed to make this choice because I really didn't understand what I had lost until I came back. And what I had lost was a lot. 99% of what I had over there, I don't have here. And adjusting to that, and living in this beautiful hellscape was um, impossible if I reached into the world. The more I reached into the world, the more it hurt. The more I reached inside myself, the more peace I found. And what I found is that through these practices, the capacity of the space inside myself for the presence of the divine heaven, being, radiance, vibration increased. And so much so that it became now who I am. And I don't say that lightly. I I know that through long meditation practice, I believed Yogananda and Patanjali. It's like I took them for their word. And this practice, if you use the tools, these are the results. And the other major component of integration for me was the mysticism. The more I practiced, the thinner my veil became, the more likely I was to be able to have additional mystical experiences that would leave part of my psyche shattered and reassembled. Afterwards, I'd come back a new person again, and will have been transported into another deepening lesson of identity and connection. And it was through divine grace, a series of these mystical experiences, ending I don't want to say ending because it's not over yet. After my near-death experience, the second one, and these series of mystical experiences in combination with this interior journey, I found myself finally letting go of the final strand of my attachment to myself. Because even though I was going through this entire process, this entire time for freaking 35 or 40 years, I still held back this little tiny bit of me because this little tiny bit of me was still afraid to to lose what it knew of itself. And so finally, after all of this, sometime in 2016 or 17, I finally one day just let go. That little line, that little strand. And when I let go, I found myself so much more balanced. I found this center point between the worlds, this the world out here and the world in here. And now I'm in this center point, but my back foot is weighted. I'm leaning on my back foot into my interior life. And my front foot, though it touches this world, has a lightness to it. And so I'm everybody noticed. It's, I have never been able to hide my near-death experience. I kept it a secret for 20 years, but I was never able to hide it because you can't hide who you are in the world. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And so after this second time, the second death, I found that capacity for speaking had nothing to do with my mouth and everything to do with my interior. And that this radiant being of light speaks for itself and touches hearts for itself because those hearts have already been touched. And so it creates this connectivity to the world that has been growing ever since I began this whole process. I these days, the last thing I'll say about integration, these days, near-death experiencers can talk to other people. I didn't have anybody to talk to. My peer group were all dead ancient mystics. I went to divinity school. I studied mysticism. The dean of students let me do this. And so I found in the ancient mystics, and I was in a Christian school, so I was studying the Western, Eastern and Western Christian mystics. Um, I found in them the same thing I found in the Upanishads and in the Vedas and Patanjali. I found this strong stream of mystical experiencers who had had oneness, union, moksha. There's all these different names for it, self-realization, and the practices that they kept enabled them to find balance in the world. And there was a great variety of practices, but they all seem to work if they're about breath and mental concentration. So if you come back from your NDE and you're lost, talk to someone and look inside and know that this integration is, I'm not going to be done integrating till I die. And then there's the real integration. I was in another dimension. I was in another realm. They used to call them heavens. Now we could call them vibrations, or in physics, maybe other universes. I was in a place where I had no body, no physicality. There were no molecules. There were no cells. I didn't have a brain. There was nothing to contain the essence of myself except for this energy field. And I was made of nothing. I mean, no thing. There was no thing in this universe that's comparable to what I experienced over there. So I was no thing in a place of nothingness. And this nothingness was initially the size of our universe, and it was completely dark, and it was no thing, but it was also self-illuminated because I could see in every direction simultaneously. I could see the darkness. And it was like I had 10,000 eyes, and there was timelessness. And I felt like all time was folded in. It wasn't just linear time, in one direction. It was like backward time and inverted time. And it was so multidimensional. There's so much multidimensionality, even in this space. And I was utterly alone, but completely content. I knew myself for who I had been always, that I had never, that my human life was simply an incarnation of my eternal nature. And I knew this to be truth. And when I was in this vast space, there was a barrier I couldn't see through. And this barrier was a deeper darkness that was infinity itself, because I was still somehow finite. I was still not complete, even though I was in the belly of the divine. So this is like this universe is like this huge womb, and I'm in gestation, but I'm living inside of this, and it is the divine itself. But there was this barrier to infinity. So somehow this was like a subset of infinity, but it was so much greater than here. And out of this deep darkness, impenetrable, a light came, and this light was gigantic. I was gigantic, and this light was much more gigantic than me. I was like the size of the sun, and this was the size of the galaxy. It was just like this huge light, and but so much smaller than the whole space that I'm in. And it was emanating out of this deeper darkness. And as soon as I saw it, I fell in love. And that is a trite way to say that it was it is the most luscious, beauty, desirous, all life I'd ever wanted. And I knew that I wanted it. And as soon as I thought it, I wanted, I moved toward it as it moved toward me. And so my thought was my action, and my thought was this of purity. And when I came close to it, I saw that it had flow. It was emanating all life. Like it wasn't just like all life on earth. It was all life in all the universe and more. It was the creator of all that is. And it was simultaneously a bazillion different colors I've never seen before, and one single color white light. And it wasn't flipping from A to B. It was always both at the same time. There was this sense of many and oneness, infinite many and this oneness. And it was um s- I, I touched it with my being, and it flowed into me and expanded me, and sucked me inside it. And I could see a tunnel into the deeper darkness, and I could see myself. And then I went through this whole series of levels of experience where deeper and deeper I saw the truth of myself. And the first thing that happened is there was this simultaneous experience of understanding that my soul self was always being called into being. I was named, but there's not a name in human terms, and it's definitely not Peter. It's this. I was spoken into being, and but everlastingly so, from ages and ages and ages ago, but always in the now. So this strong sense of ancient time and continual nowness were one thing, and as that happened, I saw this gigantic eyeball, and this eyeball was made of light, and it was close to me and distant from me and much bigger than me, and it was looking at me and into me. And as it looked into me, I kind of reshaped into a light body. And I'm in this light body, and all of my life, all of my previous human life is illuminated, but not, even though the eye was looking at me, I was illuminated from the inside. So I had this experience where the record of my life wasn't notated by some stenographer somewhere in a courtroom. It was the divine had lived my life as me and knew everything about me. And I had this understanding of that nature of myself, but I also simultaneously had this understanding of the smallness of my life. So it was these two things at once. And inside of the smallness of my life, there was this darkness. And this darkness of some things I had done, I tried to hide from the light, but there was nowhere to hide this because it was everywhere in me. And so as soon as I tried to hide this darkness, small fist baseball size, I was brought into that darkness. So I entered into this darkness, and I had a life review. So that my first part of my life review was, in 99.999% of me is good. Even the bad choices that I made were still good. But then there was this baseball-sized darkness. And when I went inside of this darkness, I experienced all of the pain that I gave to everyone in my life from the inside of their life. So I became them as I was also me, experiencing all of my reasons and emotions for injecting this pain into them. And then I was also simultaneously feeling what would have been live time in their life, what they were feeling and what they were thinking about the pain that I was causing them. And the pain that I was causing them was so much bigger than the pain that I thought that I was causing them. And the pain that I caused them caused me pain. And so it attached to me. And as I went through this chronology, there was this overwhelming voice speaking to me without language that is all things, saying, I love you, I love you, I made you, I've always loved you in every action of your life. I was there and am there, and I love you as you are. And as I understood this, that I was beloved, I began to listen through the lens of love in my heart that I had carried with me, that had been given to me by people I had given away. And as I listened through this lens of love, this one single eye, where I could see the divine and it could see me, the I had this experience of all of the pain going away. And I wasn't judged. I was beloved. And I judged myself in comparison to purity. And I was impure in comparison. But the purity loved me anyway. And I saw all of the baseball sized darkness expanded to all of humanity, and that everybody had this darkness in them, and that it wasn't just in humanity, it extended into the very existence of the universe itself. That there is a in this universe there is this limitation in order for it to exist, where everything basically eats something else. And so everything, it's a place of its creation is its regeneration, and that includes our human nature. And that my human nature that caused me to make these choices, well, I didn't write the code for that, and that nobody else had either. That this is much bigger than our little tiny planet, and that much bigger than our little tiny humanity, and that the my equality to the worst of us was more equal than my inequality to the purity of all, and that even so I was beloved and everyone was as well. And once I accepted that, I was inflated by this unitive experience of beauty and love and truth and knowledge and understanding that has expanded me to this place at which I could have gone through the tunnel into the darkness itself and been reabsorbed, but I didn't. I stayed at this very edge of it where I was in a communion state with union. And it it showed me my previous lives, many previous lives. I went into two of them. I saw myself entangled with the oneness of being, as a single photon of the bazillion that make up the single consciousness. I saw that there was a lower layer of myself that was this everlasting being called into being by name self that had all these different lives, and that none of them were me, and that even this level of my soul incarnating self wasn't the truth, a whole of me, that I was a much purer being than my soul could ever be. And then I kind of all shrunk down to a remembrance of my recent humanity, and I thought about my parents, and that's when it comes to the story of um, why I came back. The most important life lesson I've learned in this life is I'm not from here. I get to go home. And because of that, I get to choose light and love above all else, including myself. And that love really is the only treasure we have here, and that romantic love and human love are subsets of this unconditional love. They're tastes of it, but they're not the same thing. They are of it, but not it. And so love becomes this access point, kindness, compassion. Not meaning, I don't mean being tolerant of abuse, and I don't mean being putting up with bullies, because loving oneself matters as much as loving the other, and sometimes it matters most, because love is love is love. So you will find out in the moment of your death that you're not your body, and if you learn to see light and love here, it'll be easier to see it as you depart. And I found that the light was so overwhelming on the other side, so powerful, I couldn't resist it. It was irresistible. So have no fear.
So,
There are some ways that meditation has been shown over a lifetime. It's not a quick, if you want it tomorrow, that's not the route. But if you want it forever in your lifetime, it is. So even with all the mystical experiences, the varieties, near-death experience, um, Kundalini awakening, which you don't cause, and it happens to you. You might set up for it, but you don't make it happen. Like all mystical experiences, meditation and psychedelics. The University of John Hopkins University has this long-standing study on psilocybin, and it has a measurable, scientifically based uh, proof that an heroic dose, carefully and clinically applied with the correct setting and state of mind, can lead to an end of duality experience in which the recipient comes back with a higher sense of self, but then, like all the rest of us, has to figure out how to integrate that. And that's where practicalities of practices of integration come in. So you can make it happen, but I give a word of caution with that. Be careful if you're headed that route, because you have to face your darkness. It gives you what you need, not what you want. And in order to um, transect this inner scape, one has to be willing to walk into terror. And that terror it's necessary to do that in order to gain the gifts. And not everybody has a psychological makeup that has capable of doing that. So if there's mental illness in the family, it's not a good idea. If there's instability, it's not a good idea. Because the amount of the dosage isn't what you take at a Grateful Dead concert. The amount of the dosage is heroic, and you would need a guide, and you might want to curate music, and you might want to be prepared to come back an entirely different person. So these mystical experiences, there are basically four characteristics, according to William James, the varieties of religious experience from the turn of last century. They are they are transient. They have a beginning and an end. They're passive. They happen to you. You don't make them happen. You can help them happen, but you don't make them happen. That leaves noetic understanding inside oneself. There's a drop of wisdom that comes along with this new self perspective, and then it's noetic. Pardon me. Yes, it's noetic understanding, and then it's ineffable. It's unspeakable. You can't ever really say it. Not ever. Which is why all mystics throughout the history of the world all speak in metaphor and symbols, because you can't say what can't be said. Because even in the Hebrew scriptures and the Torah, the divine has no name. It's represented as YHWH in English. In some translations, it's translated with vowels incorrectly. Yahweh, the German derivation is Jehovah, but in the Hebrew, it's the Huvier Vuvier. It's four letters that's unpronounceable. And it's called the name. And it is representative of humanity's inability to articulate this thing. The upside of it is that as one dives deeper into it, it speaks for itself. And so if you're seeking an experience, know that there's a huge downside to it. We all, we all, yes. I thought there was an exception to this rule among my NDE friends, but I recently spent time with one of my NDE friends who I've known for decades, before and after mine, but before and after his. Um, it it comes with downsides. I thought that he came back with this exuberant joy. I came back not that way. I didn't get this. I didn't carry this like radiant joy back with me, but he did. And I thought, God, this guy's not going to have to integrate. Well, it turns out he does, and he has been. There's no avoiding that because it so radically changes you and all of your relationships. And he's one of the exceptions to the rule. He's still married to the same woman, and that almost never happens. And when you have these radical experiences. So be careful what you wish for. It comes with grace and blessings. And that is the understanding that well, for me anyway, that I'm not from here. I know where I'm from and I know where I'm going and I can't wait to get there. But it's also not distant anymore. It's present. So in short, if you want to have this experience, practice some kind of spiritual life that takes your mind away from itself. And that's the ticket. No definition. Indefinable, unspeakable, ineffable, no containment, no thingness. Everything I say about it is a reduction of it, and the reduction is so far away that it is um, only comparable to things of humanity and has nothing to do with that. Okay, that said, beauty, beneficence, omniscience, omnibenevolent, omnipresent, joy, knowledge, creator, beloved, sustainer, purveyor, definer. There's so many words that structure all of reality that it is. And ultimately, in a single word, two words, light and love, but uncreated light and unconditional love. And the only way to know is to stop the sense of self, an attachment to who we think we are, to have a taste of it. But the good news is most people have a taste of it in their lifetime. And I can say that because a study at the International Association for Near-Death Studies by Dr. Marjorie Willicott, a researcher, in one of her studies of, say, 350 people, grieving people, 60% of grieving people have an after-death communication. That's like, who doesn't grieve? So that's 60% of the population. So lots of people have these uh, divine encounters, and every one of them that carries love and delight and joy leaves that little lodger in your soul, that noetic understanding. And so most people, most people have these experiences, and religion in general, um, very general, especially aspects of Western religion repress this, especially Christianity, because there's this passage in the New Testament where it says, even the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light, and it makes fearful people of all of us. And the truth is that there is no death, and that you've probably had an experience. And if you choose to recall that experience and reflect on the emotion of that experience, which is closer to the experience than the image in your mind, the feeling of what happened, you have your own doorway back into heaven. And that is a tool that it comes to atheists and Muslims and Jewish people and Christians and Buddhists and you all over the world, Jains and Sikhs, and it's not just us here in our little corner of North America. It's a universal human experience. Well, I know something of depression and suicidality because I was suicidal. I had suicidality for from 1980 to 2015. And I when I was dead the first time, I was given a prohibition of taking my own life because I not only didn't even make my human life, I didn't even make my soul self. And I came back to this sarcophagus of a world and regretted my choice immediately and became angry over the long run that I was allowed the choice and not forewarned what I would suffer. I was pretty angry about what happened. And the isolation and separation from this unitive state where I lost 99.9% of myself. That 0.1% came back with me and it was real and present, but it was nothing in comparison. And so I fell into this isolation. I had no one to talk to for 20 years. Everything I saw was different than everybody else. My behaviors were, um, well, I became freed from a lot of social constraints, and not just freed like I ignore them, but like I just don't care. And my value system so shifted, that I did care deeply about certain things that would often get me into difficulties. And so that combination of being both in the world and not of the world without a balance point drove me into a deep depression. And so even though I was doing, as I described to you, all this Kriya yoga and meditation and dove right in, I was simultaneously in the darkness of the world. And I felt like I was in exile. I was like an alien stranded. My spaceship crashed here, and I had to take on human form, and I am completely different than everybody else, and nobody knows it but me, except for that my behavior's weird. And the things I say are like people would, here's an example. People would say, well, it's better than being 6 feet under. And I'd be like, nah, not so much, and laugh. And they'd be like, and that was even before I came out of the closet. So I prayed for my death every day. Every single day of my life from 1980 to 2015, every day I had a single prayer inside, in the midst of all these other ones. Take me home today. I want to go home. Is today a good day? Am I out of here yet? And I found, again, talk therapy helps with trusted people. I found that ultimately what healed me was diving deep inside myself by finding a way to um, trust the light enough with the loss of my egoic attachment was the only solution that I found. Um, Compounding this, plus there was always post-traumatic stress disorder that compounds these things. And so the night I died was terrifying, and that left a deep mark inside of me. My childhood trauma of my sister's vanishing was ongoing trauma. And then throughout my ministry, someone tried, I've been shot at, I've been held at gunpoint at separate times, and someone tried to kill me once, smash my head in. I've been under threat, and all these, like my life is under threat, and the police are involved, and there's dangerous things going on, and so there was this compounding of trauma, which deepened my darkness. And the deeper my darkness became, the more I found that my interior world was my only sanctuary. And so the harder it became on the outside, including the inside of my head. I consider the inside of my head part of my outside. And so the harder it became in my life, in my brain, and the way that I was thinking of myself, because I then had these ruminations, this guy's going to kill me. What do I do about my family? All these things like this running through my mind all the time. I had to learn to stop those thoughts, stop my rumination, and dive deep into the light inside myself. And I found that talk therapy helped a lot with my PTSD. I found that facing my shadow side helped a lot with my PTSD. I finally went back to where I died the first time, which was a terror to me. I mean, every time I thought of it, people were like, "Hey, you do all this backpacking. Why don't you go back to what?" This is even before I told them, all right, and after. Why don't you go back to that place that sounded great? I'm like, I'm not going back there. All I see is darkness and fear. And but I went back there and faced my shadow side, and but meditation and divine favor. Those are the things that healed me. So if you are depressed as a result of your mystical experience, know that that's the norm because you've lost a sense of your identity and you are a new self and you have to figure out how to live in the world. But also know that you have the avenue inside yourself to reconnect back to your origin should you choose it. But you have to choose it. Um, in the end, all of that goes away at the moment of death. And that's the greatest joy there is. Freedom, knowing that. And the first time I got shot at, I was in the wrong neighborhood and turned around in the wrong house in a gang-ridden city, and the gang poured out and opened fire at us. And there wasn't just one guy, there was like seven guys, and they're all shooting at us as we burned down the street. I got held at gunpoint in Tegucigalpa when I stepped off an airplane with an M16 on my heart and the safety off the trigger. And then I got assaulted, intervening in a vandalism, and this kid nearly killed me. And then his dad, who was just out of prison after 18 years for attempted murder, smuggling, kidnapping, grand theft, and arson all in one night. He then, after we prosecuted this his son, who just found out that he was his son, after we during the prosecution of this kid, the father threatened my life. And all I was living on an island, and all the fishermen on the island said, "This guy, you got to get a gun. You got to protect yourself. This guy's going to come for you and your family. We all know him." And so I eventually left the island. Um, and that's some of it, of what happened. And so there was this compounding of trauma, but also I was putting myself out there. The state police called, and I was on this island. The cop says, "Man, I think there's vandalism going on at the school across the street. I got a call, and it's right across from the church parsonage where I was a minister." And I was like, "Hey, I'll check it out." I look out the window. Nah, there's nothing going on. I tell them I hang up. And then a few minutes later, I hear it and I think, I know all these kids. I don't want these kids to get in trouble with the law for doing something stupid. I did stupid stuff when I was a kid. So I went outside to intervene. And that's when this kid came at me. And I was not a defenseless person. I was fit and strong and capable. But he came out of the dark and swung a heavy sign at my head and would have crushed my skull had I not deflected it, and ended up breaking my leg. And it was a harrowing thing for the entire island. And then it ended up with my life under threat by this uh, man. Well, I don't know about pre-planned or not, because when I was coming back my first time, I was given a choice of a million doorways that were led back to my body, all these different lives, all these different aspects of my new self that I could live. And there was a big beam of light in the middle of all of these doorways, kind of like a flower petal going, the middle of the flower where the pollen is, and then the petals going outward. And I was told to choose light, choose a life. And I could have gone into the main beam, this big, huge door, but I chose a little door off to the side because I wanted to some humanity. And as I went down this tunnel back to my body, there were all these other doorways leading to all these other probabilities. So there's a lot of free will. There was a huge field of probability. And so I have a lot of choice in this. So to answer your question, yes and no. Because I'm not afraid of dying. It's not like and I'm not, I, I have a risk taker's personality, but I had that before I died. I was ice climbing, for crying out loud, and a lot of other stuff. Always trying to control the situation leading up to this adrenaline, rushy kind of thing. And here's this thing about it though. I'm an ADHD. I have ADHD. So when I'm in highly challenging situations, my mind becomes hyper focused in the now. So ice climbing and rock climbing is all about being in the absolute center of the now. And it's the same thing. I ride bikes. I sail. I race sailed for years. All these sorts of things that put me. I ski inside of the moment of the now. So I have that, but I think it was compounded by desire, my disregard for my own life, and the regard for other people's lives. And so my action that night with the vandalism was strictly to protect. And that's what I went out for. I didn't want these kids getting in trouble. And I knew that the cop would have been mad at me. And I knew this. I knew this. He's statey, and I knew him. And he's a nice guy. But I didn't want these kids to get in trouble. And so I went out to do something that another pastor wouldn't have done. And so they were frequently experienced. Was frequently in situations where I was helping sufferers of domestic violence literally escape their homes. And that often put me at threat. And those sorts of things. Because I came back with this strong necessity of serving those who can't help themselves. And so I was frequently working among the poor and the powerless who were facing overwhelming odds. And directly, which meant that I was not always in safe environments. My wife was super glad when my ministry ended and I went into television. Some insight. One of them is that because of when cardiac care came online in the 1960s, medical science started raising the dead. And there are tens of millions of near-death experiences as a direct result of medical science. And never in the history of the world has that been true. There've always been near-death experiencers. You can find it in the literature going back. But there's never been tens of millions of us in North America and tens of millions more in Europe and Asia and Australia and Japan. And so we're in Africa, we're everywhere now. And that is a major shift. And every one of us is like the end of a fiber optic cable with a diode on the end of it. And so we're fiber optically cabled to the divine light, and there's a diode in our hearts. And 70% of us use the words light and love independently of each other. Like we're like, what is it? It's like light and love. That's what it is. And then we start talking about it. Turns out that's what everybody thinks. 70% of us are the words we use. So we're scattered all over the world. So there is this, and there's this energetic thing that happens with us, between us, and with other mystical experiencers. It's not just us, but there's so many more of us now, and there's so many of us speaking out about this depth of our own eternal nature that has not to do with religion, that has to do with the structure of reality. That's a huge change. Now, in that context, that's been growing for 60 years. This is not a new thing, but it's now there's social media, there's movies, your channel, there's books about it and magazine articles. It's coming into the public square in conversation, which should be able to free up the conversation, not only for near-death experiencers, but for everybody else who's had these kind of out-of-body mystical experiences, that we're not crazy, that this is a normal human thing, especially around grief. So there's all of that. And then, of course, there is climate change. And that is going to, in one way or another, reshape the distribution of populations around the planet. And there are areas that weren't desert will become not, that were desert will become wet, and we're experiencing that now. I mean, how often has Ontario had a tropical depression coming up from the Caribbean, like right today? Yeah, that's a pretty rare thing, but it's not getting to be so rare anymore. So there's that going on, and then there's the politics, the left and the right, and it's not just in my country; it's all over the world. And then there's the threat of nuclear war, and that is a biggie. The nuclear clock, as I understand it, is the closest that it is to has been to midnight since I was a kid. And we're in a situation where that could reshape humanity. So all of this, there's all this chaos. And that one thing I'm sure of is that we've never solved our problems politically. Never. Humanity has always had tribes. We're a tribal species. And until we see ourselves as a singular species, until we understand that, I think it's like 99% of our DNA is exactly the same, some number in that range. We are that much more alike than we are different. Until we recognize our oneness of humanity, I don't see great hope for humanity, except for this raising of consciousness that's happening now. And so in corporate culture, in community culture, in order for a culture to change, the most common way a culture changes is through cataclysm. It can be designed. Corporations want to change their culture. They bring in specialists and they go through vision and mission and all this kind of stuff, and they change their culture. But on a larger scale, cataclysm is what usually happens. And the more of us that talk about this now in the public square, the more likely we can nudge the direction of our future. The tide against it is great, but the actuality and reality of it living inside us in a way that is way beyond conviction is eternally more powerful. And so in this cataclysmic time of chaos, I do the same thing I do inside my own self when my private world is in chaos and cataclysm. I dive deep inside myself and I live through the lens of the light in my daily life. And in my small little space, I live on the end of a peninsula, on the end of another peninsula, and my little tiny community. I try to be in the presence, in the spirit. Christians would say, I try to be in the spirit at all times in all conversations, and not talk about it. I'm not trying to be showy. I'm not trying to convert people. I'm just trying to sit inside the truth of peace and let that be my lead. And um, I have hope for humanity. I have hope. I do, especially because of the cataclysm. If we don't have nuclear war, we're still going to have to face climate change. And that means reorganizing ourselves. And we're all over the world. I know that there's an International Association for Near-Death Studies group in Israel, and I know that there's one in Iran, and I know that they talk to each other because it supersedes political and cultural and religious boundaries. So that's my hope for humanity. I think things are going to get a little bad for a while, but I think on overall, we're going to be. Plus, you throw in AI and robotics, and you toss in the the interstellar appearance of all of these UAPs, formerly known as UFOs, all over the world. There's a lot going on, and the only stable place is in the heart. PeterPanagore.love. I'm on YouTube and all sorts of social media.
And
Love the people you're with, kindness and compassion, but don't put up with bullies.
thank you so much, Peter. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
You too, Amana Deep. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.